Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. The first time I saw one of them up close, it wasn't in some dramatic downtown street with flashing sirens and camera crews. It was on a 2-lane county road outside Kane, Pennsylvania, where the woods press in tight and the shoulders are soft, and the only sound most days is a logging truck downshifting on a hill. I was standing in orange rain gear beside my work pickup, holding a clipboard that had gotten damp around the edges, arguing with a contractor about a washout that had undermined a culvert. I'm not a cop. I'm not a soldier. I'm a county road and bridge guy, supervisor level, the kind of person who gets called when a storm drops trees across Route 6 or a plough takes out a guardrail. That morning, the calls had been weird. A dispatcher from the county 911 centre asked if we could block a back road near Ludlow because there's a medical situation and law enforcement is tied up. Then, another call. A school bus had stopped on the shoulder and the driver refused to move because a man was in the road, acting wrong, trying to grab the door handle. Then an urgent message from a friend of mine who works in the emergency medical service. Stay out of town. Something is off. People are biting. I'm not kidding. People are biting. That's the exact phrasing. It's burned into my brain because it sounded like a prank or a mistake or a bad joke that got loose in the radio system. And then the man stepped out from the tree line. He wore jeans and a dark hoodie, wet with rain, and one shoe. His head bobbed like he couldn't find the horizon. He moved in short, shuffling bursts, then froze, then lurched again. His hands were held out the way people do when they're sleepwalking. I remember noticing his fingers looked swollen, pale, and stiff, like he'd been in cold water. He turned his face toward us and his mouth opened, not a scream, not words, a broken, hungry sound that didn't match the rest of him. The contractor stopped mid-sentence. We both just watched. The man stumbled toward the pickup, straight at the driver's side door. His eyes didn't lock onto mine or the contractor's. They were unfocused, as if he was tracking the vehicle itself, not the people beside it. When he reached the door, he put both palms on the window and pushed slow and steady. The glass flexed slightly, making a dull, threatening noise. The contractor swore under his breath and reached for the door handle. "Don't," I said, sharper than I intended. The man's head snapped to the side at the sound of my voice. The movement was too fast for how clumsy his body looked. His eyes found me, not like a person, like something in him recognized noise as food. He left the truck and came at me. I took 2 steps back on instinct. My boots slid on wet gravel. My brain did a fast inventory of tools. A flashlight, a tape measure, a radio, a utility knife, a pry bar in the bed of the pickup. Nothing that made me feel safe. The contractor grabbed a short-handled shovel from his truck and swung it like he was shoeing a dog. The flat blade hit the man's shoulder with a solid thump. The man didn't flinch, didn't stumble. He just turned and latched onto the shovel handle with both hands, pulling it toward his face, mouth open. The contractor yanked back, startled, and the man moved with it, stepping closer, teeth snapping at the air. The contractor's eyes went wide. He looked at me like he'd just realized we were both standing on the edge of something that didn't have a name. I did the only thing I could think of. I reached into the bed of my pickup, grabbed the pry bar, and jammed it between the man and the shovel handle, using it as a lever to force space. Metal squealed against wood. The man's mouth closed on nothing but rain. He swung his head again, and this time I saw his lips and chin were dark, wet, and smeared with something I didn't want to identify. I pushed hard, all my weight, and the man's hand slipped. He lost balance for half a second, and in that half second, I used the pry bar to shove him sideways into the ditch. He landed awkwardly in mud and water and rolled. Most people would gasp, curse, try to sit up. He didn't. He just began to crawl, hands digging like he was trying to climb out of the earth itself. The contractor dropped the shovel and bolted for his truck, tires spitting gravel as he peeled out. I ran too, Not proud of it, but honest about it. I jumped into my pickup, slammed the door, and locked it without thinking. The man was already back on his feet, mud streaked across his hoodie, walking toward the road again. I backed up fast enough that my tires chirped on wet stone. The truck fishtailed slightly and then caught. In the mirror, the man turned, tracking my movement, and started after me with that same uneven, relentless pace. No pain, no fear, no hesitation, just purpose. I drove straight to the McKean County maintenance yard and locked the gate behind me. I didn't do it because I had a plan. I did it because it was the closest place I knew with fences, equipment, fuel, and tools. A place I understood down to the bolt patterns and breaker panels. A place where, if the world was turning upside down, I could at least hold on to something solid. The yard sits outside Kane, not far from US Route 6, a grid of gravel lanes between salt sheds, storage buildings, and a couple of steel garages. There's a chain-link fence around most of it, topped with barbed wire in places. It's not a prison, but it's not nothing either. The kind of place that keeps honest people honest and slows down anyone trying to steal a pallet of road salt. I parked inside, killed the engine, and just sat for a moment, hands on the wheel, listening to the rain hammer the roof. My radio crackled with chatter from county crews and the 911 centre, snippets of panic, road closures, calls for ambulances, a trooper asking for help with traffic control, and then, this was the part that made my stomach go cold, a dispatcher telling units to use extreme caution because people were not responding to commands and attacking. Attacking. The words were still careful, still trying to fit reality into the box of normal incidents, but the tone behind the words was a new thing. I got out and ran to the office building, a squat structure with a break room, a small dispatch desk we used during storms, a storage closet full of signs and cones, and a utility room with the electrical panel. The yard had power, at least for the moment. Cell service was spotty like it always is, but my phone lit up with messages that piled on top of each other like snowdrifts. My sister, Claire, "Are you okay? Don't come to town." My co-worker, Vince, "Boss says stay home. Everyone stay home. If you're out, go somewhere safe." An unknown number, National Guard to be deployed. Then another message, "I heard Pittsburgh is gone." Then another, "It's in Erie." Rumors travel faster than anything, faster than infection, faster than the truth. I tried calling my sister, no answer. I tried calling my friend in emergency medical service, Cara Mitchell. She answered on the second ring, breathing hard, voice tight. "Ben," she said, "where are you?" "At the yard. What is this?" I don't know. We had a call at a trailer park. A guy was sick, fever, shaking. His family said he'd been not himself. When we got there, she stopped. I heard something in the background, a shout, then a loud bang like a door slamming. He attacked my partner, tried to bite him, like an animal. My throat went dry. "Is your partner?" "He's hurt. We got him out. We're at Kane Community Hospital. But listen to me. Don't come here. Don't come near the hospital. It's a mess. They're trying to lock down, but people keep showing up. Some of them are already..." She swallowed. "Ben, are you alone?" "For now." "Good. Keep it that way until you understand what you're dealing with." "What am I dealing with?" "I don't know," she said again, and that was worse than anything. Cara is the kind of person who always knows the next step. Hearing her admit she didn't know was like watching a compass needle spin. "Do you have supplies?" she asked. "Tools, fuel, some food in the break room, a generator, radios." "Okay," she said. "Okay, stay there, lock up. If anyone comes, don't let them in unless you're sure. And Ben, yeah, if you see someone acting wrong, don't get close. Don't try to help, not yet." We hung up. I stood in the maintenance office with the rain rattling the windows and the fluorescent lights humming overhead, and I realized something simple and ugly. The rules had changed. In my world, if someone is in trouble, you help. If a car slides off the road, you pull them out. If an old man's house loses power in a blizzard, you run a generator out there and you get him heat. That's what communities do. But whatever this was, it took the instinct to help and turned it into a weakness. It made kindness into an open door. I walked the yard with purpose after that, moving like I had a checklist, because if I didn't give my brain a job, it would spiral. First, gates. The main gate was chain link with a steel slide bar and a padlock. Good. I added a second lock from the tool crib, a heavy one we use on fuel cages. Then I pulled a loader, one of our front-end loaders, big yellow, with a bucket that could lift a small car, and parked it inside the gate as a physical barrier. If something hit the gate, it would hit steel and hydraulics, not just chain link. Second, doors. The office building had a front door with glass panels. Glass is a liability. I went to the sign storage and pulled 2 sheets of plywood and a box of screws. I didn't do a perfect job, but I covered the glass from the inside and braced it with 2x4s scavenged from a pallet. I did the same for the break room windows, not because I expected an army, because I'd seen one man ignore pain like it was a suggestion. Third, visibility. I didn't want to be blind. I climbed onto the roof using the exterior ladder and stood in the rain, scanning the tree line. The yard sits in a shallow dip. Beyond the fence is brush, then woods, then the county road. I could see headlights in the distance, cars moving too fast. One of them swerving, then stopping abruptly. I saw 2 figures in the road. One fell, the other moved over it. I couldn't see details. I didn't want to. I climbed down, heart thumping. I have a firearm. In rural Pennsylvania, that's not unusual. Mine was a practical thing, not a hobby. Kept clean, locked up, mostly for coyotes near the chicken coop and peace of mind when I'm out on back roads alone. It was at my house, not at the yard. County policy and, frankly, common sense. But the yard had other things. We have flare guns for emergencies. We have bear spray and some trucks. We have heavy equipment that can move tons like it's nothing. We have metal stakes for road signs, coils of chain, rolls of snow fence, pallets of sandbags, and enough fuel to keep a generator running for days if you ration it. And we had something else. A small trailer-mounted light tower, the kind you see at nighttime roadwork. It has a diesel engine and telescoping mast with powerful lights. I rolled it near the center of the yard, topped off the fuel, and started it. The lights snapped on, turning the rain into a curtain of silver. If someone, or something, came near the fence, I wanted to see it. By late afternoon, the radio traffic changed. Less routine, more silence between transmissions. A deputy called for backup and then cut off mid-sentence. A dispatcher tried to raise units and got nothing but static. A county official came on and told everyone to shelter in place until further notice. Shelter in place. That phrase landed like a weight. I ate a granola bar from the break room vending machine and drank water from a tap that suddenly felt like a privilege. Then I started making my own map of reality. I wrote down names of people I trusted. Cara Mitchell, Emergency Medical Service. Tyler Sykes, a Pennsylvania Game Commission warden I'd worked with during a search and rescue a year ago. Old man named Walt Kerr, retired electrician who lived out on a ridge and had a ham radio set up that could talk across states. And a mechanic named Javi Morales, who ran a small shop in Kane and could keep anything with an engine alive. I didn't know if any of them were safe, but writing their names gave me targets for action. Without that, I'd be sitting in a plywood box office, waiting for the world to end. The first visitor arrived at 6:18 p.m., just as the sky started to dim and the rain slowed to a fine mist. Headlights approached the gate. A pickup truck, older, dark colour. It stopped outside the fence. The driver leaned on the horn, a long, desperate blast that echoed off the salt shed. I moved to the office window, peering through a gap in the plywood. 2 people were in the cab, a man driving, a woman in the passenger seat. The man got out, hands raised, and shouted, "Hello, anyone in there?" His voice was strained but human. He looked normal, wet jacket, baseball cap, shoulders hunched against the cold. The woman stayed inside, head turned, watching the road behind them. I didn't open the gate. I didn't walk out. I spoke through the yard's external loudspeaker, the one we use during snow operations to coordinate plows. "Stay where you are," I said, my voice sounding too loud and too flat. "Who are you?" The man flinched at the sudden amplified voice. "My name's Curtis. Curtis Malloy. My wife is Dana. Please, we just need somewhere safe. We saw your lights." "Is anyone hurt?" I asked. Curtis hesitated. "No, we're just scared." That answer wasn't enough. Fear makes people lie. Fear makes people hide things. "Get out of the truck slowly," I said. "Both of you. Keep your hands where I can see them." Dana opened the passenger door and stepped out. She was in her 30s maybe, hair plastered to her face. She held her hands up. Both of them did. They looked like people surrendering, and it twisted something in me, because the last time I'd seen that posture in real life was on a training video about active threats. "What's happening out there?" Curtis shouted. "I don't know," I yelled back, "but I'm not opening this gate until I'm sure you're not sick." Dana's eyes flashed. "Sick? We're not sick." "Then prove it," I said, and hated myself for the way it sounded. I watched them for a full minute, scanning for signs, stumbling, twitching, aggression. They just stood there in the mist, shivering, eyes darting, human eyes. Behind them, on the road, something moved between the trees, a figure, half hidden, swaying. Curtis saw it too. His face drained. "Oh God," he whispered, loud enough that I heard it through the speaker system's faint echo. The figure stepped into the beam of the yard lights. It was a person, or close enough, a man in a torn jacket, head tilted, arms hanging loose. He walked straight toward Curtis and Dana, ignoring the truck, ignoring the lights, just drawn toward movement and sound. Dana backed toward the pickup, making a small panicked noise. Curtis stepped in front of her instinctively. The figure reached them and lunged, not fast like a sprinter, but sudden like a trap snapping shut. Curtis threw up his arms. The figure grabbed his sleeve and went for his neck with its mouth. This wasn't a fight, it was predation. Curtis screamed and shoved, trying to break free. Dana grabbed the truck door handle, yanked it open, and fumbled for something inside. Maybe a tool, maybe a weapon, maybe just keys. I had seconds to decide. If I did nothing, Curtis would go down. If Curtis went down and Dana tried to help him, she'd go down too. Then I'd have two infected outside my gate and a truck blocking the road, and my conscience would be a black hole. But opening the gate was still out of the question, too risky. I did the only thing that made sense at the time. I took a road flare from the emergency cabinet, thick, red, the kind that burns hot and bright, and ran to the inside of the gate, staying behind chain link. I lit it with shaking hands. The flare hissed to life, spitting sparks, turning my world crimson. The figure outside the gate turned its head toward the flare, distracted by the bright light and sound. It released Curtis's sleeve and took a step toward the gate, toward me. Curtis stumbled backward, almost falling. Dana grabbed his arm and hauled him toward the truck. I slammed the flare against the chain link fence, thrusting it through a gap near the bottom, as far out as I could without risking my fingers. The figure reached for it and jerked back as the flare burned its hand. It didn't scream. It didn't yelp. It just recalibrated, leaning in again, drawn like a moth to something that should have been pain. Curtis and Dana scrambled into their truck and slammed the doors. Curtis started the engine, tires spinning on wet asphalt, and the truck shot forward, leaving the figure behind. It turned, tracking the truck's movement, and followed. I stood there with the flare sputtering and the rain steaming off it, chest heaving, and I realized something critical. These things weren't smart, but they were responsive. Light and sound mattered. Motion mattered. They could be pulled, redirected, guided like a dangerous current. That was the first seed of what later became my trap plan, not as a fantasy of turning the tables, but as a practical need. If you can't fight something head-on, you shape where it goes. Night fell hard after that. The yard lights made a bright island, but beyond the fence was black forest and uncertainty. I turned on a small portable radio and scanned channels, mostly static. A few stations talked in fragments about quarantines, state police checkpoints, and violent incidents. They used careful language. They avoided the obvious words. They sounded like they were trying to keep the public calm while the floor gave way beneath them. At 9:47 p.m, I finally got a text from my sister. "Ben, I'm at home. Locking doors. Don't come. Love you." It should have been comforting. Instead, it made me feel helpless. I slept in the office on a cot we keep for overnight snow operations. Boots on, jacket on, pry bar within reach. Sleep came in shallow waves, broken by imagined noises and real ones. The light tower engine, the wind in the fence, the occasional distant scream that might have been a fox or might have been something else. At 4:12 a.m, the power went out. The fluorescent lights died. The hum of the building stopped. For half a second, there was perfect silence. Then my emergency lights clicked on, battery-powered units in the hallway, and washed the office in pale green light. Outside, the yard lights went dark too. The big island vanished. The only light left was the faint red glow from the light tower's control panel, and even that flickered. I moved fast. I knew the yard's backup generator, a diesel unit in a small shed, could power the office and a few critical loads, but not everything. The light tower was separate. The fuel pumps were separate. The salt shed was irrelevant now. I got the generator started by 4:25 a.m, using a practiced routine. Check oil level, check coolant, open fuel valve, battery switch on, start. The diesel coughed, then caught, settling into a steady rumble that felt like life support. The office lights came back on, but I didn't turn on everything. I prioritized the radio base station, a few exterior lights near the gate, and the break room refrigerator. I left the rest dark to conserve fuel. In the grey dawn, I climbed the roof again and scanned the road. Abandoned cars sat at odd angles. One had its door open. Another had its headlights still on, beams pointing into the trees. I saw no people moving, no infected either. Just stillness. That kind of quiet is never good. By mid-morning, I had a plan that felt less like panic and more like engineering. I couldn't stay in the yard forever without information. I needed contact with someone who understood the bigger picture. I needed a network, and I needed to reduce the risk of something pressing against my fence at night until it gave. The yard's chain link was a delay, not a wall. If enough bodies leaned on it, infected or desperate survivors, it would bow, then fail. So I started building layers. First layer, noise discipline. I shut down anything that could draw attention. No loud music, no unnecessary engines. I ran the generator only in cycles, 2 hours on, 2 hours off, to charge batteries and keep the fridge cold, then quiet again. I avoided using the light tower, except in short bursts at night. Second layer, barriers. I used jersey barriers, concrete sections we keep for work zones, to reinforce the fence line inside the yard, especially near the gate and along the most accessible stretch facing the road. I moved them with the loader, placing them in a staggered line, so if the fence failed, the barriers would catch anything coming through and force it to funnel. Third layer, guidance. This was the part that felt strange even as I did it. I used snow fence, bright orange plastic mesh on wooden stakes, and created a corridor outside the yard, along the ditch line, leading away from the gate and toward a low area where the ground dipped. I wasn't trying to create a weapon. I was trying to create a path of least resistance, so if infected wandered toward the lights or noise, they'd drift into the corridor and be guided away. Then I added what I'll call the diversion pits. If you've ever worked around roads, you know what happens when you leave an open excavation. People fall, deer fall. Anything moving without attention falls. A hole is a simple machine. It doesn't need power. It doesn't argue. It just waits. I chose a spot outside the fence where the ground was soft and already disturbed from a past drainage project. I used the backhoe to dig multiple deep depressions along the guided corridor, spaced out so nothing could just step around them easily. I didn't make a single giant hole that could become a hazard to me later. I made a series of narrow traps that would slow, stop, and contain movement. I'll be clear, I'm not going to lay out measurements or instructions. This wasn't a craft project. It was a desperate adaptation, done with heavy equipment, in a specific place, under specific conditions, with the understanding that everything you build can also hurt you later. I lined the pits with angled posts, road sign stakes and salvaged timbers, less as a weapon and more as a way to prevent easy climbing. The goal was containment. If an infected fell in, it would stay in long enough for me to decide what to do next, without it pressing my fence at midnight. Over the pits, I placed light coverings, brush, scrapboards, leaf litter, just enough to look like ground to something that moves without thinking, but not enough to support weight. I marked the safe edges for myself with subtle signs only I would recognize. A strip of reflective tape low to the ground, a rock pattern, a stake on the far side. It felt wrong to build traps in my own county, in my own woods. It felt like turning the land into a weapon. But then I remembered Curtis Malloy's scream and the way the thing outside my gate had gone for his throat without hesitation, and the moral math got simpler. That afternoon, as I worked, a state game warden truck rolled slowly down the county road, lights off, creeping like it didn't want to be seen. It stopped near the yard gate. A man stepped out, wearing a green uniform jacket and a brimmed hat soaked dark by rain. He moved carefully, scanning the tree line with the focus of someone who has spent years looking for movement that doesn't want to be seen. Teller Sykes. I knew him instantly, and relief hit me so hard my knees almost went weak. I went to the fence, keeping distance, and called out, "Tyler!" He turned, and his hand went to his side, where his duty sidearm would be. Then he recognized me. "Ben!" he called back, voice rough. "You alive in there?" "Yeah," I said. "You?" He laughed once, humorless. Still breathing. He approached the fence, but didn't grab it. Smart. He looked at my barriers, the generator shed, the light tower. The equipment moved like chess pieces. "You've been busy," he said. "I had time," I replied. Tyler's eyes flicked toward the pits along the ditch line. He didn't comment directly. He just nodded like he understood without needing the details. "You got a radio that reaches out?" he asked. "Base station, but power's intermittent. Cell service is garbage." "I've got an amateur radio in the truck," he said, using the full words, not a nickname. "And I've been trying to raise anyone who isn't screaming. There's a guy on a ridge, Walt Kerr, who's still transmitting, says he's hearing calls from as far as Ohio." The name hit me like a bell. "Walt's alive." "As of an hour ago," Tyler said. "He told me to get higher ground and stay away from hospitals. He also said headshots work." I stiffened, the words ugly and blunt in the rain. Tyler held up a hand. "I know. I didn't want to say it either, but he's not guessing. He said people are trying everything else and it's not stopping them." We stood in silence for a second, both of us swallowing the reality. Tyler pointed back toward the road. "Ben, I can't stay long. I've got 2 people in my cab, a teenage kid and his mum. They were holed up in a hunting camp near Marionville. Dad didn't make it. They need somewhere safer than a canvas tent." I looked past him and saw them. Faces pressed to the glass, eyes wide. My instincts screamed, "Don't open the gate." But Tyler was one of the most competent, steady people I'd ever met. If he said these 2 were clean, I believed him more than I'd believe almost anyone. Still, belief isn't a medical test. "Bring them to the fence," I said. "One at a time, hands visible, no surprises." Tyler nodded, no offense taken. He walked back, opened his truck doors, and guided them out slowly. The mum was pale and shaking. The kid, maybe 14, held a small backpack like it contained his entire world. I asked them questions through the fence, simple ones, but with intent. "Have you been bitten? Have you had fever? Any confusion? Any injuries?" They answered, scared but coherent. I made them lift sleeves, show ankles, show neck. I hated it. They hated it. But it was the new world. When I was satisfied enough, I opened the gate just wide enough to let them in, then slammed it shut behind them and locked it again with both padlocks. The mum, her name was Lila Hart, burst into tears the moment she crossed the threshold. Not loud, just shaking sobs that made her look small. Tyler stayed near the gate, scanning the road. "Thank you," Lila whispered to me, voice raw. "Thank you." I nodded, not trusting my own voice. Tyler stepped closer. "Ben," he said quietly, "this isn't staying local, it's everywhere. They tried roadblocks on Route 6 near Warren. It failed. People drove through. Some were infected, some were desperate. It became chaos." He rubbed rain off his face. "I need to keep moving, but I don't like leaving you here without support." "You're not leaving me," I said, surprising myself. "You're building a network. That's support." He gave a tight smile. "You sound like you've already decided this yard is your fort." "I didn't pick it," I said. "It picked me." Tyler reached into his truck and pulled out a duffel bag. He tossed it over the fence. "Supplies," he said. "Medical kit, extra batteries, water filter pump, some food, and a handheld amateur radio. Walt told me the frequencies he's monitoring. I wrote them down." I caught the bag and felt its weight like a lifeline. "Bring Kara," I said suddenly. "If you see Kara Mitchell, emergency medical service, tell her I'm here." Tyler's expression shifted. "Kane Hospital is a hot zone," he said carefully, "but I'll try." He climbed back into his truck and paused. "Ben, one more thing." "Yeah?" "Don't assume people are the biggest threat. People are just people. The infected. They're predictable. They go to noise and movement. People will lie to get inside your fence." He looked at my pits again. "Those will help, but don't let them make you feel safe." Then he drove away, disappearing into the mist. That night, with Lila and her son, Owen, sleeping on cots in the office, I sat at the dispatch desk. With the handheld amateur radio, Tyler left me and listened. The voices on the air were faint, crackling, but real. A man in Ohio describing a highway jammed with abandoned cars. A woman near Buffalo asking if anyone knew where her husband was. Walt Kerr's steady voice, calling out like a lighthouse. "Station on the ridge. This is Walt Kerr. If you can hear me, keep transmissions short. Share location, status, needs." When I finally pressed the transmit button, my thumb felt too heavy. "This is Ben," I said. "Ben Adler, McKean County Maintenance Yard outside Kane, Pennsylvania. 3 people inside, secure perimeter, power intermittent, fuel available, looking for information and medical guidance." There was a pause. Then Walt's voice came back, clearer than I expected. "Ben Adler, I copy," he said. "Good, stay put. You've got a defensible position. Do you have running water?" "Yes," I said, "for now." "Then you're ahead," Walt replied. "Listen carefully. This is not a flu. This is not a riot. It's an aggressive infection that changes behavior. Fever, confusion, then violence. And after a person drops, they sometimes get back up." My skin prickled. Lila's sobbing earlier replayed in my head. Curtis in the rain. The thing outside my gate reaching for the flare. Walt continued. "Avoid hospitals. Avoid crowds. If you must engage one of them, aim for the brain. Nothing else seems to stop them reliably." The words were clinical, not dramatic. That made them worse. I swallowed. "How far is this spread?" Walt sighed, and the sound crackled. "Ben, it's national. I'm hearing stations from multiple states. Some places are worse than others, but no one is untouched." I stared at the plywood over the window, seeing nothing but my own reflection in it. "Any organized response?" I asked. A bitter laugh from another voice on the channel. Someone not Walt. "Organized?" the voice said. "You mean like the government telling us to stay calm while everything burns?" "No." Walt cut in, firm. "Keep it useful," he said. "Ben, if you can, link up with people you trust. Establish rules. Don't try to be a hero." I looked toward the cots, where Lila and Owen slept, their faces finally slack with exhaustion. I thought of my sister alone in her house. Rules, network, trust. The next day, the yard became more than my hiding place. It became a small node in a broken county. We got our next arrivals around noon. Javi Morales, the mechanic from Kane, and Cara Mitchell, the emergency medical service woman, together in Javi's tow truck. When I saw Cara step out, alive, my throat tightened so hard I had to look away. They approached the gate cautiously. I didn't open it immediately. Even with Cara, I had to follow procedure. That procedure was the only thing keeping panic from turning into fatal mistakes. Cara didn't argue. She held her hands up, showed me her arms, her neck. She looked exhausted, smeared with grime, hair pulled back tight. Her eyes were sharper than I'd ever seen them. "Ben," she said when I finally opened the gate enough to let them in, "you did the right thing staying here." "Hospital?" I asked. Her jaw clenched. "Overrun," she said. "They tried to lock doors. People forced them. Some staff got hurt. Some patients changed. I got out because Javi drove a tow truck through the ambulance bay like a battering ram. I owe him." Javi snorted. "You owe me a coffee," he said, trying for humor and failing. Once inside, we held a meeting in the break room like it was a normal storm response. The table was sticky with old coffee rings. The vending machine hummed. The absurdity of that normal background made the conversation feel like it was happening in two realities at once. Cara laid out what she'd seen with blunt clarity. "Transmission is by bite," she said. "Also blood contact with open wounds, maybe. We don't know everything, but bites are the big one. Fever comes first, confusion, then violent behavior. After death." She hesitated, and I realized she was trying not to break. "After death, some come back," she said quietly. "Not everyone, but enough that you cannot assume someone is gone just because they stop moving." Owen, listening, looked like he might vomit. Lila put a hand on his shoulder. Cara continued, "They are drawn to sound and motion. They don't seem to tire. They ignore pain. They can be slowed by barriers and contained, but they keep pressing. And yes, damage to the brain stops them." No one spoke for a long moment. Then Javi tapped the table. "Okay," he said. "So we treat this like a machine problem. Contain it. Control the inputs. Don't feed it noise." I almost laughed, but it was the first thing that sounded like a plan. We established rules that afternoon. Not suggestions, rules. 1. No one opens the gate alone, ever. 2. Anyone who arrives stays outside the fence while we assess. Questions, visual check, no exceptions. 3. No one goes on a run alone. Minimum 2 people, ideally 3. 4. We conserve fuel and power, generator cycles, no unnecessary engines. 5. We build a communications schedule, Waltker's radio watch windows, our own check-ins. 6. We designate zones, sleeping, medical, tool storage, food storage, sanitation. We treat the yard like a tiny base, not a camp. Cara set up a medical corner in the office using supplies from the first aid cabinet and her own bag. She created a clean bin and a dirty bin, basic infection control, because even if we didn't have perfect knowledge, we could reduce risk. Javi inspected our equipment like a surgeon. He checked the generator's filters, fuel lines, battery connections. He checked the loader's hydraulic leaks. He checked the light tower. He treated every machine as a resource more precious than gold. Lila helped where she could, cleaning, organizing, taking care of Owen. She wasn't dead weight. She was a person pulled into disaster, and I watched her straighten her spine hour by hour as shock wore off and survival took its place. And me, I expanded the perimeter. The pits and the corridor were only the start. I used more snow fence and signage panels to create a wider funnel away from the gate. I moved scrap metal and pallets to block easy approaches. I set up noisemakers, not booby traps, not lethal, but simple alarms. Strings tied to empty cans hung on the fence line. So if something pushed the mesh at night, the cans would rattle. I rigged a battery-powered driveway alarm from a hunting store supply cache we found in a truck. Motion sensor, chime inside the office. The pits were controversial, even among us, and I understood why. Kara didn't like them. She didn't say, "It's wrong," but her face tightened when she looked at them, because she saw people falling in, not just infected. So we modified our approach. We marked safe paths clearly on our side. We made sure the corridor pulled outward toward the woods, not toward any house or road where a person might stumble, and we agreed. If we saw a living person near the corridor, we would shout, warn, guide them away before the pits became a tragedy. We were building a system, not a killing field. The first real test came on the fourth night. We heard them before we saw them, a low chorus of broken sounds drifting through the dark, carried on cold air. The generator was off. The yard was mostly dark except for two small lights near the office door and a dim lamp inside. The driveway alarm chimed once. Then again. Then a third time, rapid, like something moving back and forth. I grabbed the handheld radio and woke Javi and Kara. Within seconds, all of us were at the office window, peering through a small gap. Shapes moved beyond the fence, more than one, swaying. The moon was thin, but enough light caught their faces in flashes. Pale skin, slack mouths, eyes reflecting faintly. A group, 5, maybe 6, they pressed toward the fence where the corridor started, drawn by the faint glow and the smell of people, maybe, or just by random drift. One hit the chain link with its shoulder, and the fence shuddered. The cans I'd hung rattled softly, then louder as another pressed. They didn't test, they didn't probe, they just leaned and leaned and leaned, like pressure was their only thought. I felt my heart hammer. The fence would hold for now, but repeated pressure, night after night, would weaken posts, loosen ties, bend metal. This wasn't one incident. This was erosion. Light, I whispered. Javi shook his head. If we light up, we pull more. Kara's voice was tight. We need to redirect them. I thought of the flare, the way the infected had turned toward bright noise, the way they followed the truck. We didn't need to fight them. We needed to steer them. I grabbed a handheld air horn from a winter kit. I also took a flashlight, but kept it off. I opened the office door, stepping out into wet cold. The yard was black around me, equipment hulks like sleeping animals. The infected were at the fence line, silhouettes, hands gripping mesh. I walked, not to the gate, but along the inside of the fence toward the start of the corridor I'd built. I stayed behind barriers, keeping distance. Then I blasted the air horn once, hard. The sound ripped through the night like a siren. Every head snapped toward it. The group turned, bodies pivoting awkwardly, and they started moving along the fence toward the source. I stepped back, then moved again, keeping the sound ahead of them, drawing them like a line of iron filings following a magnet. I used the flashlight briefly, one sharp beam, then off. The beam was a lure, not an invitation. They moved into the corridor area outside the yard, where the snow fence guided them away from the gate. One stumbled, then disappeared abruptly as it fell into a pit with a dull thud that I felt more than heard. Another followed, then another, drawn forward, not thinking, and dropped too. The corridor did its job. It funneled movement into a controlled area. But one didn't fall. One reached the edge, hands clawing, and began to climb, using the angled posts as purchase points. It didn't care about splinters. It didn't care about strain. It just moved like hunger made it stronger. Kara was beside me now, holding something I didn't want to look at too closely. Her hands were steady, but her face was pale. "We can't let it get out," she whispered. I nodded, jaw clenched. What happened next wasn't heroic. It wasn't cinematic. It was grim necessity carried out by people who didn't want to do it. We handled that one at the fence line, using distance, barriers, and the one truth Walt had given us. I won't dress it up, and I won't describe it in a way that turns it into entertainment. The important part is this. The threat stopped. The corridor held. The fence did not fail. When it was over, the night felt colder, as if the world itself had noticed what we'd done and judged it. Back inside, Owen cried silently into his hands. Lila held him. Javi sat at the table staring at nothing. Kara washed her hands for a long time. I went to the office and sat alone, listening to the rain start again, and I realized that every solution had a cost. Every layer of defense scraped away a little more of the person I'd been before. Still, we survived the night, and survival, in those early days, became its own form of morality. Over the next week, the maintenance yard became a place people whispered about on the radio, a beacon in a county gone dark, not a safe haven for crowds. We couldn't handle that, but a node, a relay, a point of coordination. We made runs for supplies, careful ones, to places that made sense. A small grocery on the edge of Kane at dawn, when the streets were quiet. A farm supply store for fencing and gloves. A pharmacy drive-through for basic medical supplies when Kara insisted we needed antibiotics and bandages more than we needed extra snacks. We avoided big box stores, avoided crowds, avoided the hospital. We moved like hunters in our own town, not looking for prey, but avoiding becoming prey ourselves. On one run, we found Curtis Malloy's truck abandoned in a ditch, front end smashed against a tree. No bodies, no sign of Dana either, just silence and a smear on the driver's side window that made my stomach turn. I stood there in the rain and felt guilt spike like a nail. If I had opened the gates sooner, could I have saved them? If I'd done more than distract, could I have changed their path? Kara put a hand on my shoulder. Ben, she said quietly, you did what you could without getting us killed. That's all anyone can do now. I wanted to believe her. Some days I did, some days I didn't. The biggest shift came when we encountered our first group of living strangers who weren't asking for help, they were demanding it. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon. Cold sun, hard shadows. We were doing maintenance on the generator, cleaning the air filter and checking fuel quality, when a sedan rolled up to the gate and stopped. 3 men got out, all adults, all armed. I won't list specifics because it doesn't matter. The point is, they had weapons, and they knew how to hold them. They didn't raise them at first. They held them low, casual, like a threat wrapped in politeness. One stepped forward. He was tall, wearing a camouflage jacket and a knit cap. He smiled as if we were neighbors meeting at a hardware store. "Afternoon," he called. "We saw your lights at night. We're looking for fuel and food." I stayed behind the fence, hands visible, voice controlled. "This is county property," I said. "We have limited supplies. We're not set up for trade." The man's smile didn't fade. "We're not asking for trade. We're asking because we need it." Javi muttered in Spanish under his breath, a prayer or a curse. Kara stood beside me, calm but alert. I made my voice firm. "If you need water, we can fill jugs and hand them through the fence, but we're not opening the gate." The man's eyes narrowed slightly. His friendliness was a mask. I could see the impatience behind it. "You got a whole yard full of equipment," he said. "Fuel tanks, generator. You're sitting on resources while people out here are starving. That equipment keeps this place running," I said. "It keeps our radio on. It keeps us alive." He leaned closer to the fence, voice dropping. "Then maybe you should share before we decide to take." I felt the moment harden. This was the line Tyler warned me about. Infected are predictable, people are not. I glanced at the other 2 men. One was scanning the fence line, looking for weak points. The other was watching my hands, not my face. They weren't here to negotiate. I took a breath. "You don't want to do this," I said. "There are pits out there, traps. You push this fence, you'll funnel into them. And we're not the only ones listening on the radio. If you start something here, everyone will know." It was partly bluff and partly truth. The pits were real. The radio network was real. But everyone will know was wishful thinking. The tall man smiled again, but now it was sharp. "You threatening us, county boy?" "I'm warning you," I said. For a long second, no one moved. Wind stirred the snow fence. Somewhere in the woods, a crow called. Then the tall man stepped back and raised his weapon slightly, not pointing directly, but enough to make the message clear. Kara's voice cut in. Steady. Listen, she said. You can leave and stay alive, or you can try to force your way in and draw infected from the road with noise. Either way, you're not getting inside this gate. The tall man's eyes flicked to her. Who are you? Someone who's watched this infection up close, Kara replied, and someone who won't let you bring it into our fence. He stared at her, weighing. Then he laughed, a short, ugly sound. Fine, he said, keep your little fort. He turned to his men. We'll find softer people. They got back in the sedan and drove off. My legs shook after they were gone. Adrenaline is a liar. It makes you feel strong in the moment and then it leaves you empty. Javi exhaled hard. That's going to happen again, he said. Yeah, I answered, staring at the road, which means we level up. That night, we changed our perimeter strategy. We reinforced the gate with a welded chain we found in a storage bin, looped through the steel frame and anchored to a loader bucket parked inside. We added more barriers inside the fence line, where a vehicle might try to ram. We moved the light tower to a position where it could be started quickly if we needed to blind and confuse at night, but kept it off otherwise. We also made the pit safer for us and more effective for containment. We deepened one area to create a holding zone that could corral multiple infected without letting them press directly against the fence. We improved marking for our own routes, so we wouldn't become victims of our own defenses in a panic. Every improvement made the yard less like a workplace and more like a fortress built by reluctant hands. In the second week, Walt Kerr's radio calls changed. His voice became more strained, less steady. Station on the ridge, he called one morning. I have movement near my property, multiple infected. I'm not sure how long my fence will hold. My stomach tightened. Walt was older. If he went down, we lost our strongest link. I pressed transmit. Walt, this is Ben. Can you relocate? A pause, then Walt replied, voice crackling. Relocate where, Ben? Roads are blocked. I'm on a ridge for a reason. Kara leaned over my shoulder and whispered, ask about his power. Walt, I said, what's your power situation? My generator is low on fuel, he admitted. I've been rationing. Amateur radio runs on batteries too, but I can't charge them without power. Javi swore quietly. I looked at Kara. She met my eyes, and I saw the decision forming between us without words. We couldn't save everyone. That was a truth we'd been living with, but Walt wasn't just everyone. He was the spine of our network. We can bring you fuel, I said into the radio. We can bring you batteries, but you have to meet us halfway. We can't drive to your doorstep if the ridge road is compromised. Walt chuckled, dry. You're offering to be my delivery boy in the end of the world. I'm offering because we need you, I said, and my voice cracked a little. And because you do it for us. There was a long silence. Then Walt's voice returned, softer. All right, he said. I'll try to reach the old logging landing off the gravel access road by 3 p.m. If I'm not there by 4 p.m, don't wait. We planned the run like it was a hazardous materials transport, because in a way it was. Fuel is life. Fuel is also risk. And the roads between the yard and Walt's Ridge ran through forest and scattered homes where infected could be anywhere. We took the county dump truck because it was heavy, high clearance, and less likely to get stuck. We brought 2 fuel cans, spare batteries, water, and a medical kit. Kara came because she insisted. Javi came because he could fix anything that broke. Lila stayed with Owen in the yard because the yard needed a steady hand too. We left at 2:10 p.m, moving slow, windows up, eyes scanning. The dump truck rumbled through Kane like a dinosaur through a ghost town. I saw abandoned cars at odd angles. I saw a shopping cart in the middle of the road. I saw a dog running alone, ribs showing. We saw infected too, scattered. One in a driveway, swaying. Another stumbling in a ditch. We didn't engage. We didn't have the luxury of cleaning the whole county. We had a mission and a narrow path. The logging landing was a wide patch of gravel and mud where trucks once loaded timber. Now it was empty, ringed by tall pines, the air smelling of wet needles. We parked facing out for a fast exit. We waited. At 3:27 p.m., Walt Kerr appeared on the tree line. He looked like someone who'd lived through wars, even if he never had. Mud on his pants, a backpack, a long gun slung, carried not as a threat, but as a tool. His hair was white and plastered down by rain. His eyes were bright and sharp. Behind him, deeper in the trees, something moved. Walt saw our faces and held up a hand. "Don't panic," he called. "I've got company." A shape stumbled into view behind him, then another. Two infected, moving slow but steady, drawn by his movement. Walt didn't run. He walked faster, controlled, like he knew that panic would make him trip. I wanted to jump out and drag him into the truck. Kara grabbed my arm hard. "Stay in the cab until he's close," she hissed. "If you open the door too soon, they'll follow you inside." Walt reached the gravel. The infected stepped out too, feet dragging. Walt turned at the edge of the trees and tossed a small object, metallic, into the brush. It clanged, loud. Both infected pivoted toward the sound. Drawn instantly away from him, Walt didn't waste the moment. He jogged the last 20 yards to the truck, hauled himself into the cab, and slammed the door. I didn't ask questions. I put the truck in gear and rolled forward, tires crunching gravel, leaving the infected wandering toward the sound in the brush. Only when the trees swallowed the landing behind us did I breathe again. Walt exhaled and leaned back, shoulders shaking once. Then he looked at me. "Ben Adler," he said, "you look like you've aged 10 years. I laughed shaky. "You too, Walt." We brought him back to the yard that day. It wasn't part of the original plan, but once he was in our truck, once he'd admitted his ridge wasn't holding, the decision became obvious. The yard wasn't perfect, but it was layered. It had equipment, it had fuel, it had people, it had rules. Walt became our fourth adult, our radio operator, our voice to the outside world. He also became something else, an anchor. Older people have a way of making you feel like history still matters, like civilization isn't just a fragile skin that peeled off in 2 weeks. That night, as Walt set up his radio gear in the office and Kara adjusted her medical supplies, I walked the perimeter alone with a flashlight, checking fence ties, listening to the woods. In the corridor area, I heard movement from the pits, shuffling, scraping, low sounds, contained, held, a grim success. I stood there in the dark and felt the weight of what we'd built. A county maintenance yard turned into a defensive position. A handful of survivors turned into a team. A series of pits and fences turned into a system for steering the infected away instead of meeting them head on. And still, it didn't feel like victory, because victory implies an end, a finish line. What we had was a way to keep breathing one more day, and then another, while the world rewrote itself outside our fence. The next morning, at 7:06 a.m., Walt raised someone on the radio who changed everything. It was a voice from a structured group, calm, disciplined, using consistent procedure. Not military exactly, but organized. They described a temporary safe zone being established near a larger facility with water access and perimeter options, down toward the Allegheny Reservoir, closer to more open ground and less forest choke points. They were coordinating small convoys, bringing people in waves, prioritizing those with skills, medical, mechanical, electrical, logistics. Walt scribbled notes as the voice spoke. When he finished, he looked up at us around the break room table. "This," he said, tapping the paper, "is the first real sign of rebuilding I've heard. Not just survival, coordination." Javi leaned forward. "Where?" Walt pointed. "Near Kinzua Dam area. They're using the terrain, water on one side, cleared lines. They have a plan." Kara's eyes sharpened. "If it's real," she said, "it could be the difference between dying here in a month and living long enough to see normal again." Lila held Owen closer. Owen's face, for the first time in days, showed a spark of hope. I stared at the map of our yard in my mind. Our barriers, our generator, our pits, our little systems. We'd built a workable island. But islands can sink, and staying put forever wasn't the same thing as living. I nodded slowly. We verify, I said. We gather intel, and if it holds up, we plan a move. Walt smiled, a tired but genuine thing. Spoken like an engineer, he said. I didn't correct him. I didn't tell him I was just a road guy who knew how to keep equipment running and people alive. Because in the new world, titles didn't matter. Competence mattered, calm mattered, community mattered. And out there, beyond our fence and our pits and our improvised corridors, something was still trying to pull itself back together. For the first time since the man in the hoodie had put his hands on my truck window, I let myself imagine that maybe, just maybe, the story didn't end at a chain-link gate. Maybe it moved forward, and if it did, we were going to move with it. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.